Hey friend, Colin here from Sumthins Recording, and today I'm going to show you how to EQ and compress drums when recording. Today we're going to be going over EQ and compression for drums when recording, and we're just going to be using the stock plugins inside your DAW. So it's going to be EQ and compression for drums during recording process, but with plugins inside your DAW. And this is going to help you make sure you get a more polished and professional drum sound right from the source, right at the recording process. Before we dive in here though, if you're ready to go a little bit deeper into the drum mixing process and you want to dial in a repeatable workflow for cranking out professional sounding drums, then you need to go through my 3-step framework for mixing drums workshop. This workshop is going to walk you through the simple 3-step process that I go through on almost every single one of my drum mixes to help you get professional drum mixes right from your home studio. It is a 100% free to watch, on-demand video training, and you can get instant access to that by clicking the link below in the video description. Now let's jump in here and take a look at these drums. So these are raw drum recordings here, and you can see all of our faders are pulled down across the mix here. So we're kind of starting to just level balance things here, and I want to go through the EQ and compression process on the drums. I don't record through any gear. I don't have a lot of outboard gear. I am mostly digital here at the studio, mostly in the box. So when I do EQ and compression for drum recordings, I do it in the DAW and bounce through them like I was recording through outboard gear here. So that's what we're going to do here today. We're going to pull up each track one by one and go through the EQ and compression on each drum here. So we're going to start with our kick in here. So let's take a listen to our kick in mic. My first choice for EQ on drums when it comes to the recording side of things is usually going to be any API style EQ. Sometimes I'll reach for a more knee style EQ, but I like the simplicity and I like how smooth an API style EQ is. The top end is really, really beautiful and it does nice big cuts in the mid-range as well. On kick drum, it does have a nice touch in the bottom end, which is very smooth sounding, which is nice in the recording process. I don't need to be aggressive, and I'm not trying to do really pointed cuts. I'm doing big moves here, big moves, what am I trying to say? Big generic moves, so more general type moves across the drums in the recording process. So I'm going to start with this API style EQ, and we'll probably start at 800, 50, and 7K. So these are the 3 ranges on the kick in mic. We're going to have more mid-range here, so I'm going to be cutting more of this 800 style stuff, and then this is going to give us that nice top end click from the beater hitting the head, and then of course some bottom end punch around 50 hertz here. So let's hit play. You can hear our kick drums already sounding much more polished, our kick in mic, just from a couple moves here. So we're pulling out 12 dB at 800, so scooping out all of that honky mid-range there, adding 4 dB at 7K, bringing out that click from the beater making contact with the head, and then just a touch of this 50 hertz for some punch. Let's throw our compressor in now. On kick drum especially, I love using this DBX style compressor. If I had any outboard gear first, it would probably be DBX 160s. I love the way they sound on drums, kick drum and snare drum here. But let's start with our kick in mic here. I've got it set at 2-to-1, and we're just going to reach up towards 6 dB reduction. Hear how tight our kick drum's sounding now? Let me do a full before and after here on our EQ and our compressor, you can hear where we started and then where we end up. So here's our after, and I'll bypass the plugin. See what a big difference a little bit of EQ and a little bit of compression on our drum recordings makes for our drum kit. Now we have a so much better starting point for this kick in mic than we would have had here. So let's keep moving. Let's move into our kick out. So we're going to pull down our kick in, and I'm actually just going to copy over the same starting point here, and we'll just reset that. We'll nuke our compressor for the moment. Now our kick out mic, we're not going to have that honky mid-range. We'll probably have more of the low mid-range. So I'm going to move this down to 400 hertz here. We're going to do the same boost at 7K here. It'll be more air that we bring up on the top end, that kind of low air that you get breathing off the front of a kick drum head. And then the same 50 hertz here. We're pulling out all of that kind of woolly sound that you get usually off the front end of a kick drum head, and that's sitting around that 400 hertz there. So same kind of move we made on our kick in, pulling out 12 dB here on our mid range at 400 hertz. I'm adding 4 dB at 7K, and it's giving us more of that top end air, that breath you hear off the front of the kick drum, and then a little bit of that 50 hertz for some bottom end there. Let's throw our compressor in. Same kind of deal. We just want to go for about 6 dB reduction on the 2-to-1 ratio. All right, our kick out's sounding good. Let me do the same thing here. I'll do a full A/B on our EQ and compressor for the kick out mic. Huge difference with just a little bit of EQ, a little bit of compression there on our kick out mic. Pull that down. Let's move over to our snare top mic. So this is just a dynamic mic, SM57 on the top of the snare drum. Nuke the compressor for a second. I'm going to start with the same API style EQ here. We're going to move up. I like to add some 100 hertz on the snare drum. There's not usually a fundamental down there, but it brings up some of the nice weight on the bottom end of the snare drum. And we're going to go lower on the top end too and bring up some of this crack around 5K. I don't like to touch the mid-range on snare drum. That always feels dangerous to me, and it feels like we're going to neuter the snare drum in the recording process. I don't want to do that, so we're just going to pull up some top end and bottom end here. That's it. A little bit of crack on the top end, 4 dB at 5K, emphasizes that burst of air we get and that nice crack from the stick making contact with the head. And then 2 dB at 100 hertz gives us some nice low end weight here. So take a listen before and after, just this EQ. Gives us so much better of a starting point. I like to do a touch of compression on snare drum. I don't want to go too aggressive here. I'm just going to do maybe 3 dB reduction with this 1176 style compressor. That's all there on our snare drum. So on the 1176 here, 4-to-1 ratio, and I'm running it 0.5 5 milliseconds there on the attack, and then 50 milliseconds on the release. So medium slow attack for this unit here, and then fastest release on the 1176. It gives us emphasis on that front end attack, that front end transient, and helps tighten up the snare drum a little bit as well. Let me do a before and after here. Giving our snare drum a lot more excitement there right from the get-go. Moving over, this is kind of an extra mic to have here, so this is more of a nice to have than a need to have. It'll be pretty similar to our snare top because it's taped right next to it. It's just a condenser microphone, so a nice alternative to the 57. We're going to do kind of the same moves here, so we might end up with the same processing. So same exact processing we had there on our snare top. That's not as important as what we have next, which is going to be our snare bottom. I'm going to copy over the same processing from our snare top mic here. We'll turn off our compressor for the moment and reset our EQ. Now snare bottom, I'm going to reach higher. I don't want to emphasize any crack or high mid area. That can get edgy sometimes and be prickly on snare bottom. So I'm going to reach higher to about 10K here. We're still going to emphasize that same weight. We get that little burst of weight from our 100 Hz boost here, but this 4 dB boost at 10K gives us some prettiness on our snare bottom, so it doesn't feel so brittle or so harsh right there in the high mid area. It gives some beauty kind of to that rattle, so it seems prettier and it seems smoother up on the top end. I like to reach higher on the snare bottom so it doesn't feel so prickly or so crack oriented. We get that top end crack, that high mid area from our snare top with this 5K boost. This 10K boost helps us get more air on the snare drum on the snare bottom. So let's throw our compressor in here. We'll start with the same settings and we'll just tweak it here. Just that 3 dB reduction. So let's do a full AB on our snare bottom processing. Such a huge difference with just a little bit of EQ and compression. So now we have our kick drum and our snare drum in a much better starting point. I actually don't do any processing on the toms on the way in. If you have really nicely tuned toms, they sound great in the room. You don't usually need to touch them because the EQ we're going to do in the mixing process to get them to sit in the track is all we're going to need to make those sound great. Overheads and rooms, same kind of thing. Sometimes I'll level them down just a little bit so we end up with something a little bit closer. But what I'm actually going to do here is run them through a mic processor. So I usually like to model the overheads as U87s, and they'll enhance the bottom end on the overheads. But let me play you where they start, and I'll kind of give you an A-B here. So they're going from 57s to U87s. So take a listen. Here's where they start, and then I'll engage the mic mod, and you can hear the bottom end that we get. Hear how much more weight and depth we get on our drums just using the mic mod here, just to tweak those around a little bit. If you have nicer condensers that you can put on your overheads, I would definitely recommend that. You're going to get some more weight. I've kind of always stuck with these 57s modeled as U87s because of how good they sound through the mic modeler. So that is the overheads there. And then the last thing is the room mic, which is just the vocal mic in the booth behind there, is the slate mic. So that's running as a U47 here. It's just the VML1, I believe it is, the virtual microphone system. And it's just modeled as a U47 running through their plugin. So we've got our kick in, kick out, a little bit of EQ, a little bit of compression. Same thing with our snare top, our snare high, and our snare bottom, all running through just a touch of EQ and compression. Nothing on our tom mics here. And then our overheads are running through the mic mod, and then our room is running through the virtual mix rack, which is the VML being modeled as a U47 here. And then I do have the FG73 after it as well. So here's what our room mic sounds like. So let's get our drums leveled out here, and we'll do a full A/B on all these plugins. You can hear raw drums, so if we didn't put anything on these recordings, and then if we were to run our drums through a little bit of EQ and compression on the way in. Let's start with our kick in mic here, and we'll work our way across. All right, we've got our drums leveled out here. Let's do a full A/B on our plugins here. So it's our EQ and compression across our kick and snares, the mic mod on our overheads, and then of course the virtual microphone system running on our room mic here. So we'll start with our after, and then I'll disable all the plugins. You can hear just the raw drum recordings from the room. No EQ, no compression here on the way in. Especially on our kick and snare, it makes a huge difference and gets us to a much better starting point when it does come time to mix. So if you aren't using EQ and compression on your kick and snare, at least on the way in while you're recording drums, definitely give it a shot, and it's going to get you at a much better starting point when it comes time to mix your drums. I hope that was helpful for you. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, if you're ready to level up your drum mixes, then you need to go through my 3-step framework for Mixing Drums Workshop to help you dial in a repeatable workflow for cranking out professional sounding drum mixes right from your home studio. 100% free to watch. Just click the link below in the video description to get access to that. Thank you so much for watching here today, and I will see you in the next video.